The Galactic Training Academy had stood for 732 years, its massive chrome walls bearing witness to the greatest warriors from every corner of known space. Within these halls, elite soldiers from the Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Vortex Collective, and dozens of other civilizations had tested their mettle against the most challenging military exercises ever devised. But none, not a single soul in all those centuries, had ever conquered the legendary zero-gravity obstacle course. Commander Thex Morvac, a towering blue-skinned Zephyrian with her arms and eyes like burning coals, stood at the observation deck with his usual smug expression. His massive frame cast a shadow over the viewing platform as he watched yet another hopeful candidate prepare for certain failure. "Another human," he muttered to his aide, Captain Urel, a slender insectoid being whose antennae twitched with amusement. "These soft little mammals never learn, do they?" Down in the preparation chamber, Marcus Kane adjusted his regulation training suit and tried to ignore the whispers echoing through the facility's ventilation system. At 28 years old, he was considered young by human standards, but ancient compared to most species who attempted the course in their equivalent of teenage years. His dark hair was cropped short, military style, and his green eyes held a spark that most observers mistook for naive confidence. What they didn't know was that Marcus had been planning this moment for 3 years, ever since his younger sister Elena had been humiliated by the same arrogant alien instructors who now watched him with barely concealed contempt. The course itself was a masterpiece of sadistic engineering. Floating in a spherical chamber the size of a small city, it consisted of 17 distinct sections, each designed to exploit the specific weaknesses of different species. Rotating laser barriers that would fry anyone moving too slowly. Gravity wells that could crush bones. Electromagnetic fields that disrupted neural patterns. Phase-shifting platforms that existed only half the time. The record holder was a Vortex warrior named Crixtal, who had made it through exactly 2.5 sections before being knocked unconscious by a momentum trap. That was 43 years ago. Beginning course initialization announced the facility's artificial intelligence, its voice echoing through speakers positioned around the chamber. Candidate 7439. State your designation. Marcus Kane, human, Terran Federation military, he replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. A ripple of laughter echoed from the observation galleries. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to watch what they assumed would be yet another entertaining failure. The betting pools were already running, with most wagers placed on how quickly the human would be eliminated. Course parameters set to standard configuration, the AI continued. Gravitational fields will be randomized every 37 seconds. All safety protocols are active. Begin when ready. Marcus took a deep breath and launched himself into the spherical chamber. The first section appeared deceptively simple, a series of floating platforms arranged in a helical pattern, each one pulsing with a different energy signature. The trick was identifying which platforms were solid and which were holographic decoys. Most candidates spent precious minutes testing each platform cautiously. Marcus, however, had done his homework. During his 3 years of preparation, he had studied every recorded attempt, analyzed every failure, and identified patterns that others had missed. He pushed off the starting platform and sailed directly toward what appeared to be empty space, his hand passing through a holographic barrier to grab a camouflage handhold that no previous candidate had discovered. Interesting, Commander Morvac grudgingly admitted, his forearms crossed as he leaned forward against the observation window. The little mammal has some tricks. Marcus spun himself around the hidden grip and launched toward the second section, where rotating energy barriers created a deadly light show. The barriers moved in complex patterns, and timing was everything. Traditional approach involved careful calculation and precise movement. Marcus chose chaos instead. He grabbed a loose piece of debris floating nearby and hurled it at one of the energy projectors. The barrier flickered for exactly 2.3 seconds before backup systems engaged. In that brief window, he rocketed through the gap with millimeters to spare, his training suit singing from the residual energy discharge. Did he just break the first rule of the course? Captain Urel asked, her compound eyes widening in disbelief. No candidate may damage course equipment. Commander Morvac recited the regulation automatically, then paused. though technically he didn't damage it. He merely caused a temporary malfunction. The third section featured gravitational anomalies that created a three-dimensional maze of crushing forces. Previous candidates had attempted to navigate around the danger zones, following safe corridors that took them on lengthy detours. Marcus studied the field for exactly 15 seconds, noted the pattern of gravitational fluctuations, then did something unprecedented. He turned around and began approaching the section backward. The observation gallery fell silent. "What in the seven hells is he doing?" someone whispered. Flying backward meant Marcus couldn't see where he was going, but it also meant his movements were less predictable to the automated systems. The gravitational fields were programmed to anticipate forward momentum and trap candidates accordingly. By reversing his approach, he confused the targeting algorithms and slipped through gaps that existed only because the course designers had never imagined anyone would be crazy enough to try this method. "Unbelievable," Captain Urel breathed. "He's actually making progress." Marcus ricocheted off a gravity well and spun himself around just in time to see the fourth section approaching. This one was a crowd favorite. A field of razor-sharp crystalline shards that moved in random patterns, slicing through space with lethal precision. The shards were beautiful, glittering like deadly jewels in the chamber's artificial lighting. Every previous candidate had attempted to dodge between the shards, usually resulting in spectacular failures involving severed limbs and emergency medical interventions. Marcus grabbed 2 chunks of metallic debris and began juggling them as he flew through the section. The seemingly playful action served a purpose. The shard sensors locked onto moving objects instead of his body, allowing him to slip through while the deadly crystals chased his improvised decoys around in confused circles. "Show off," Commander Morvac muttered, but there was a note of grudging respect in his voice. The fifth section nearly ended Marcus's run. It was a sensory disruption field that scrambled neural patterns and caused most species to lose consciousness within seconds. Marcus felt his vision blur and his inner ear rebel as the field attacked his nervous system. But humans, it turned out, had an advantage that no other species possessed: an incredibly stubborn refusal to quit when logic dictated surrender. Marcus bit down on his tongue hard enough to draw blood, using the sharp pain to anchor his consciousness. He closed his eyes and relied on proprioception and muscle memory, feeling his way through the section by touch alone while the disruption field tried to scramble his brain. "Impossible!" someone in the gallery gasped. "No organic being can maintain coherent thought in that field." "Humans aren't quite like other organic beings," Captain Urel observed quietly. "Their neural architecture is remarkably resilient to interference." Marcus emerged from the fifth section with a bloody nose and a splitting headache, but he was still conscious and still moving. The sixth section loomed ahead, a maze of phase-shifting walls that existed in a constant state of quantum flux. Touch one at the wrong moment, and you find yourself embedded in solid matter when it fades back into reality. He paused, floating in space, and studied the pattern of phase shifts. Then he began to laugh. The sound echoed through the chamber's communication system, reaching every corner of the observation galleries. It wasn't the laugh of someone losing their sanity under pressure. It was a laugh of someone who had just realized that everyone else had been overthinking the problem. Instead of trying to time his movements to avoid the phasing walls, Marcus simply grabbed one of them while it was in its incorporeal state and let it carry him to the maze as it phased in and out of reality. He rode the quantum wall like a cosmic surfboard, timing his dismount perfectly as it delivered him to the far side of the section. "That's cheating," Commander Morvac declared flatly. "Actually," Captain Urel consulted her datapad, "the rules state that candidates may use any features of the course to their advantage, provided they don't damage the equipment." He's following the letter of the law, if not the spirit. By now, word had spread throughout the facility that something unprecedented was happening. Instructors, students, and administrative staff had abandoned their duties to crowd into the observation galleries. The betting pools had gone wild, with odds fluctuating wildly as bookmakers tried to adjust to the impossible sight of a human actually succeeding where everyone else had failed. Marcus reached the seventh section covered in sweat and sporting several minor injuries, but his eyes burned with determination. This section featured temporal distortion fields that slowed or accelerated time in random pockets. Step into the wrong area, and you might age decades in seconds or find yourself moving so slowly that you'd never reach the other side. Previous candidates had used sophisticated scanning equipment to detect the temporal anomalies before proceeding cautiously through safe zones. Marcus closed his eyes, spread his arms wide, and flew straight through the center of the field at maximum velocity. The temporal distortions hit him in waves. For a terrifying moment, he felt his hair growing and his joints stiffening as decades flashed by in seconds. Then he hit a reverse pocket and felt his body return to its original state. He experienced the sensation of existing in multiple time streams simultaneously, his consciousness scattered across past and future versions of himself. And somehow, through pure stubborn human willpower, he held himself together until he emerged on the far side, gasping and disoriented but intact. How? Commander Morvac whispered. How is he surviving what should be impossible? I think, Captain Urel said slowly, we've been underestimating human psychological resilience. They don't just refuse to give up when they should. They refuse to acknowledge that giving up is even an option. Marcus was now halfway through the course, farther than any candidate in recorded history. The remaining sections grew progressively more lethal, designed with the assumption that only the most exceptional individuals would ever reach them. He approached the 8th section, a field of pure energy that existed in a state of contained plasma, hot enough to vaporize most materials instantly. The safe path through was a narrow corridor barely wide enough for a single person, requiring perfect navigation and steady nerves. Marcus studied the plasma field for a moment, then grinned with genuine amusement. You know what? He said aloud, knowing his words were being broadcast to every gallery in the facility. I'm starting to think you people have been taking this course way too seriously. And with that, he grabbed a piece of metallic debris, superheated in the plasma field until it glowed white-hot, and used it as a makeshift torch to carve himself a new path through the section, completely bypassing the intended route. The observation galleries erupted in chaos. That is definitely cheating. Commander Morvac roared. The rules clearly state, Captain Urel consulted her pad again with what might have been amusement, that candidates must traverse each section to reach the next. They don't specify how the traversal must be accomplished. Marcus had now completed 8 sections of the 17-part course. His training suit was torn and scorched. His body was covered in cuts and bruises, and he was running on adrenaline and sheer bloody-minded determination. But he was smiling. No species had ever passed a zero-gravity obstacle course, then a human did it backward HFY. The 9th section waited like a glittering death trap. Crystalline spikes that erupted from hidden projectors in patterns designed to impale anything moving through the space. Each spike was as sharp as a molecular blade, and moved faster than most beings could react. The section had earned the nickname the Pincushion among Academy staff. Marcus floated at its entrance, breathing heavily, studying the apparently random pattern of deadly protrusions. Behind him, 8 sections lay conquered through methods that had left the entire Academy speechless. Ahead, 9 more sections promised escalating lethality. Current time elapsed. 47 minutes, 12 seconds, the AI announced. Previous record for reaching this point, never achieved. In the primary observation gallery, Commander Morvac had stopped pretending casual interest. His 4 massive arms gripped the railing as he leaned forward, watching the human with an expression that mixed disbelief with something approaching fear. Around him, representatives from dozens of species pressed against the viewing windows, their conversations reduced to hushed whispers. Sir, Captain Urel reported, her antenna twitching nervously, we're receiving communication requests from 17 different galactic news networks. Word is spreading beyond the Academy. Ignore them, Morvac growled. This changes nothing. 9 sections remain. No one, not even a human, can survive what comes next. Marcus had different ideas about survival. Instead of trying to predict the spike patterns, he began spinning himself like a top, arms and legs tucked tight against his body. The crystalline spikes shot out in deadly sequences, but Marcus's rotation made him a moving target that the automated systems couldn't lock onto. He ricocheted off spikes like a pinball, using each collision to alter his trajectory unpredictably. He's weaponizing the course against itself, someone in the gallery whispered. Marcus bounced, spun, and careened through the ninth section in a display that looked more like an acrobatic performance than a military exercise. He emerged dizzy but unharmed, immediately steadying himself as a 10th section came into view. This one made several observers in the gallery physically ill just to look at. It was a gravitational shear field where different areas of space experienced wildly different gravitational forces. Step from a low-gravity zone into a high-gravity zone too quickly, and the differential would tear your body apart at the molecular level. Every previous candidate who had made it this far, all 3 of them in 7 centuries, had been reduced to component atoms within seconds. Marcus approached the field boundary and did something that made Commander Morvac's eyes widen in horror. He began stripping off pieces of his training suit, tearing the fabric into long strips. "What is the deranged mammal doing now?" Morvac muttered. Marcus tied the fabric strips together into a makeshift rope, then began swinging it through the gravitational field like a lasso. Where the rope stretched or compressed, he could see the gravitational differentials. He was mapping the invisible death trap using nothing but torn clothing and human ingenuity. "Brilliant," Captain Urel breathed. "He's turned the field into a visible obstacle." Once Marcus had identified the safe path, he used his improvised rope like a guideline, pulling himself hand over hand through the gravitational maze. The fields tugged at his body, trying to rip him apart, but he moved with careful precision, following his own mapping exactly. Section 11 nearly broke his spirit. It was a psychological warfare zone designed to exploit deep-seated fears and traumas. Holographic projectors created nightmare scenarios tailored to each candidate's specific phobias, while subsonic frequencies induced panic and despair. Marcus found himself surrounded by images of his sister Elena, screaming in pain as alien instructors laughed at her failures. The holograms showed her being tortured, humiliated, broken by the same arrogant beings who now watched him struggle. For a moment, rage threatened to consume him entirely. His vision went red, and he felt the overwhelming urge to abandon the course and hunt down every instructor who had ever hurt a human candidate. Then he started laughing again. "You know what the funny thing is?" He called out to the observation galleries, his voice carrying through the communication system. "You actually think showing me my worst fears will stop me. But here's the thing about humans that you never figured out." He pushed through the holographic nightmare, Elena's screams echoing around him. "Our worst fears aren't what break us. They're what make us stronger. Every time you hurt one of us, every time you laugh at our failures, you're just giving us more reasons to prove you wrong." The psychological assault continued, but Marcus flew through it like it was a mild inconvenience, fueled by 3 years of accumulated anger and the memory of his sister's tears. Section 12 was a maze of energy mirrors that reflected and amplified any movement. Touch one wrong surface, and the reflected energy would cook you from the inside out. The section required perfect stillness and infinite patience. Marcus took one look at the glittering maze and shook his head with amusement. Patience is for people who have something to lose. He grabbed another piece of debris and hurled it into the maze at maximum velocity. The energy mirrors lit up like a Christmas tree, reflecting and amplifying the object's kinetic energy until it became a blazing projectile that ricocheted wildly through the section. While the mirrors were distracted by this energy feedback loop, Marcus slipped through their blind spots, following the chaos he had created like a surfer riding a wave of destruction. "That shouldn't work," Commander Morvac protested weakly. "And yet," Captain Urel observed, "it does." Section 13 featured quantum entanglement fields that could trap consciousness itself, leaving the body alive but the mind scattered across multiple dimensions. It was considered the most exotic and dangerous obstacle in the entire course. Marcus flew into it without hesitation, felt his awareness fragment across 17 different versions of reality, and somehow held himself together through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness. In one reality, he was a child afraid of the dark. In another, he was an old man dying alone. In a third, he had never been born at all. But in every reality, in every possible version of existence, he was still Marcus Kane, and he was still moving forward. He emerged in the quantum field with tears streaming down his face and his hands shaking, but his eyes burned with unbreakable determination. 14, he whispered to himself. Just 3 more. Section 14 was a temporal loop trap. Enter it, and you'd be caught in a recursive time cycle, repeating the same few seconds forever while your body aged and died outside of time. It was a fate worse than death. Marcus studied the temporal distortions for exactly 5 seconds, then grinned with genuine delight. Time loops, huh? You know what the best part about being human is. He flew straight into the trap. We're too stupid to know when we're beaten. The temporal loop caught him, and for a moment he was trapped, repeating the same motion over and over. But Marcus had spent 3 years studying this course, and he had noticed something that no one else had seen. The time loop wasn't perfect. There was a tiny gap, a fraction of a second where the cycle reset itself. On his 47th repetition, Marcus broke free by doing something that required perfect timing and absolutely insane courage. He deliberately induced a paradox by occupying the same space as his previous temporal echo, causing the loop to collapse under its own contradictions. The observation galleries had gone completely silent. Several representatives from different species had fainted. Commander Morvac stood frozen, his forearms hanging limply at his sides, watching something that challenged every assumption he had ever held about the nature of courage and capability. Section 15 was pure antimatter containment failure. The space itself was trying to annihilate anything that entered it, converting matter directly into energy. It was designed to be completely impassable. Marcus looked at it and started laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Oh, this is perfect," he gasped. "You design a section that's supposed to be impossible to survive, and you put in a course that's supposed to test survival skills. Do you see the problem here?" He flew directly into the antimatter field and began doing something that made several physicists in the gallery have nervous breakdowns. He was surfing the annihilation wave, using the energy release to propel himself forward faster than he could have moved under his own power. It should have killed him instantly. Instead, he emerged on the far side glowing with residual energy and moving like a comet. 2 sections left, he announced cheerfully. "I'm starting to think you guys might have been taking yourselves a little too seriously." Section 16 was a reality distortion field that made space itself unreliable. Up became down, left became inside, and distance became a matter of opinion rather than physics. Most beings who entered it were driven insane within moments as their perception of reality collapsed. Marcus flew into it backward, of course, because by now everyone in the galaxy should have expected that from him. "The thing about humans," he called out as he navigated impossible geometries and contradictory physics, "is that we've never really trusted reality anyway. We spend our whole lives making up stories, believing in things that don't exist, and pretending the universe makes sense when it obviously doesn't." He emerged from the reality distortion, looking slightly cross-eyed but otherwise unharmed. "1 section left," he announced, "and I bet it's a real doozy." Section 17, the final obstacle, was elegantly simple and absolutely terrifying. It was a perfect sphere of absolute zero temperature, surrounded by a shell of plasma hot enough to melt stars. The only way through was a corridor exactly 1 meter wide that threaded between the 2 extremes. Touch either side, and you'd be simultaneously frozen and incinerated. It was designed to require impossible precision, perfect control, and nerves of absolute steel. Marcus took one look at it and burst into laughter that echoed through every gallery in the academy. "Oh, you beautiful, arrogant, overthinking aliens," he said with genuine affection. "You designed the perfect test of everything you think matters. Precision, control, technical mastery, following the rules." He turned around and flew into the section backward, arms spread wide, eyes closed, moving by instinct and faith rather than calculation. "But you forgot the most important human trait of all," he called out as he navigated by feel through the impossible corridor. "We're too damn stubborn to die when the universe tells us to." He emerged from the final section, turned around, and flew directly into the end zone as alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Course completion achieved. The AI announced in a voice that somehow managed to sound shocked. Total time, 1 hour, 34 minutes, 7 seconds. New galactic record established. The observation galleries erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were screaming, cheering, arguing, and in several cases, having what appeared to be religious experiences. Commander Morvac stood in stunned silence for a long moment, then activated his communication system. "Attention all personnel," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the Academy. "Effective immediately, the zero-gravity obstacle course is being redesigned. The previous version has been retired." Marcus floated in the end zone, battered, exhausted, and grinning from ear to ear. When the medical team arrived to check him over, he waved them away with a laugh. "I'm fine," he said, "though I have to ask, what exactly did I just prove by doing this backward?" Captain Urel appeared at the observation window and activated the external speakers. "You proved," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to be too human to realize it's impossible." Marcus floated there for a moment, thinking about his sister Elena, about 3 years of preparation, about all the species who had watched with contempt and now stared at him with something approaching awe. Then he started laughing again, because the whole thing really was pretty funny when you thought about it. "Hey," he called out to the galleries. "Same time next week? I'm thinking maybe I'll try it upside down this time." The resulting explosion of panicked alien voices was music to his ears.